Recently, I went on the hunt for the best $100 DSLR, and today I'd like to show you exactly what I found. So let's get right into it. After 10 hours of research and combing through hundreds of eBay listings, I finally found the perfect $100 DSLR, the Rebel XS, better known as the 1000D. And today I'd like to explain to you exactly why it is the best DSLR for under $100. So let's get right into it. You're probably asking, what really did you get for $100? Well, let me explain. So first off, I got the camera body, the Rebel XS. On top of that, I got an image stabilized 10 to 55 millimeter 3.5 to 5.6 starter kit lens, which is a great way to get into photography. Next, I got a battery grip with mine, with only one battery unfortunately, but it will provide adequate support for portrait photography. Now you're probably asking, what specs do you get for $100? Well, let me get into that. First off, you get a 10 megapixel CMOS sensor that can provide 3 frames per second continuous shooting, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're first starting out, having high megapixel and high continuous shooting modes isn't really an issue. Next up, it has 100 to 1600 ISO, which provides adequate lighting for normal lighting situations, but if you want any low light, this camera will not do it. Next up, it has a 2.5-inch LCD screen, which is great for framing and making sure all your exposures are right. Since this is a DSLR, you do have the viewfinder as well if you don't want to use the screen. Next up, it has multiple shooting modes, including manual, but it also has a bunch of presets, which make it great for beginners as well. Finally, it has no video mode, but if you're just looking for a basic photography camera, this could be a great starter camera. So right now, I want to explain why 10 megapixels isn't an issue. Well, firstly, when you're first starting out, a high megapixel count means it's going to cost more. And if you want a low-cost camera, it's going to come with the sacrifice of megapixels. But the cool thing that you can do with low megapixel count cameras is make film-like images, which is great when you're first starting out, because honestly, I don't want to use a film camera when I'm first starting out, but I do want a film-like image. And the easiest way to do that is older cameras like this. So this could be a great starter option if that's the niche that you're looking for images. But let's get into the downsides of this camera. Like I said previously, there's no video modes. So if you're planning on shooting video with this camera, it's not going to happen. Next, it has 100 to 1600 ISO, which is not great, especially when you want to shoot in low lights. If you are shooting in bright environments, I would recommend keeping it anywhere below 600 ISO. But honestly, the auto ISO function is perfectly fine. And the final gripe that I have with this camera is the white balance. If you're going to buy this camera, I would recommend watching a couple videos on how to manually set the white balance. The white balance out of this camera looks atrocious, no matter whether you're using a pre-selected mode or an auto select mode. So if you're good in Photoshop, then you'll be just fine. But if you have no experience, again, I would recommend watching another person's video on how to set white balances on your cameras. Like I said previously, film-like images on this camera look fantastic. So it's really fun to sit in Lightroom, for instance, and sort through all of their film-like or retro presets. And they can make great images that can go perfectly fine in a social media page. Next up, again, the price. It was $100 for all of this. You get a lens, battery grip, and even if your camera doesn't come with a battery grip, their battery grips are like $10. And on the topic of batteries, if you need batteries, they're very, very cheap, especially used. So there's so many options with this camera. And finally, the best part about this camera is that it uses EF mounts. So like all new modern Canon cameras that aren't the RF mounts, you can use all of their lenses. 20 years worth of lenses you can put on this camera, and they'll produce even better images than the basic starter lens that you first get. And the lenses are so cheap. Today I went out and bought a new lens for my Olympus camera. Unfortunately, I don't have it for this video, but it was $300. And on top of that, it had a small nick in the glass. It doesn't affect the image quality, but if you don't want the nick in the glass, it's a $700 lens. If I wanted the same 12 to 40 millimeter f2.8 lens, I could get an equivalent 28 to 70 millimeter f.2 lens for about $500 used. And even cheaper if I'm looking at other brands. I could even find one on KEH for $100, making this great if you're just starting out and you want to stick with Canon. But if you're not looking to stick with Canon, I have another video upcoming on a Sony and a Panasonic Lumix and an Olympus camera that are all under $100 and they're all mirrorless. So if you're interested in that video, please subscribe, turn on post notifications, like the video, and I'll see you guys next week with that video. Thank you for watching.